in the future, I think we will be moving towards a policy framework where you'll be able to say, this student with this family income background, of this ethnicity, from this district of this city, with these grades from this school, applying to this university, this course, how much should we lend them because we have an idea of how much they're likely to repay back. And at that point you have financialized higher education. And the key thing is loans. You know, grants are spent, they don't generate information. Loans are lent, they go out into the world, information comes back, patterns of repayment comes back. You learn things you didn't learn. If you gave 100 quid to De Montfort and you gave 100 quid to Oxford and the money's spent, all you know is, well, I've spent both. But if you lend the money to a De Montfort student and you lend the money to an Oxford student, you can see how much money comes back and you've got information you didn't have before. The downside to this information, I mean, it fundamentally changes the relationship between students and universities. Universities were previously funded on the basis of how much does it cost to educate the student. We'll move to a model where it's all about creditworthiness. How much money should be loaned to this student studying at this institution? And this is one of the key aspects of the Higher Education and Research Bill that's going through the Parliament at the moment. It's going to link the teaching excellence framework to the tuition fee level. So in 10 years' time, if that goes through, the compound effect will have been the tuition fees at different universities will have different maximum levels. So a university that does consistently well on the teaching excellence framework will be able to set a higher tuition fee, and the government will lend you more money to study at that institution. It will match that higher tuition fee. So it's effectively saying, to the better, more will be given. We will loan more money to people to study at better institutions, and better institutions will be able to spend more money on those students because they'll have more tuition fee. And you know, this will be a cycle that perpetuates and diverges significantly. The difference between being at an institution where each student is funded £200, £500 extra racks up rapidly. If you're on a course with 500 students and there's an extra £100 each year for those students, that's, you know, that's £50,000 if my maths in my head is working for that course, and that's one course, and we're talking about a system with 1 million students in it. Once you have these what look like relatively small income differentials of, well, that's 9,000 and that's 9,500, but you've got 10,000 students, that's a huge difference in income that can all be spent on this experience of those students. It's, again, none of this is straightforward. I mean, it's counterintuitive for someone who's looking at going to university. You might think, well, it's £10,000 rather than £9,000. Maybe I'll choose to have less debt. I'll go to university with £9,000. But because of the way student loans work, you're very unlikely to see any difference in student loan repayments when faced with a tuition fee of £10,000 or £9,000, because for the vast majority of people, the amount you borrow will not be cleared at the end anyway. Only the very highest earners will see any additional repayments because of that, you know, small difference in debt, you know, £1,000 a year. And at the same time, it's much better for you as a student to go to an institution that's got that extra £1,000 per year, if that extra £1,000 is being spent on your on improving your study. You will feel the benefits of that. So perversely, you might think, if in 10 years' time you're saying, well, should I go to a £7,000 university or a £15,000 university, and the government's going to loan you 15,000 or 7,000, it makes sense to go to the £15,000 university because you know they're getting twice as well resourced, and you're going to get, you know, and that extra tuition fee could be going into bursaries. You know, it could be used in all manner of ways by the university to mitigate the problems of maintenance that we've talked about. It's going to be a completely different world. This, I think, is maybe the key point. I mean, this is a much bigger transformation than I think people understand. Okay, you might say, well, this is all a bit naive to even use this argument, but the point is, universities are meant to be pretty much the same standard, and the same degree at one place and the same degree at other are pretty much meant to be the same. We had a system that was trying to equalise things. If you're doing the same kind of subject, a classroom subject, right, you know, not comparing medicine with sociology or anything like that, the same subject at two different institutions, one older pre-92 university and the other a former polytechnic, you're getting the same money. You're being resourced the same. You'd have the same maximum tuition fee and you'd have the same direct grant from the government. If we move to a future with variegated tuition fees, we are not going to have a system that's promoting equity. There will be the good that you're getting when you go to university will be much more clearly a positional good. You know, you would have like the bad side of meritocracy, and I know there is a lot of bad side of meritocracy, so, which is, you know, you would have a stratified university system where social mobility would be traduced by turning it into talent spotting. Oh, there's a deserving child from a poor background, let's put them into Oxford. And there's a load of middling people, they can go to the £7,000 university. We're not prepared to fund them because we don't see the value add in loaning them more money to get their education. Those are kind of conversations would have made no sense to even talk about 10 years ago. That I'm outlining them in this interview might turn me into something like Cassandra, prophesizing something that can't come about. But it's part of the logic. To get the kind of competition in higher education that the government wants means differentiation and stratification of the system. It would matter much more than it does now, and it matters now which university you go to. Britain is increasingly becoming a country unequal and with very unequal opportunities. And universities, unfortunately, are embedded in that. Universities are a key part of the reproduction of the middle classes and the graduate labour market. They don't do very much to mitigate inequality unless you're very bright and you get spotted and moved up. But in the future, those disparities will become much bigger if this reform goes through. The government is very keen on what it calls market exit, and the Competition and Markets Authority is very keen on market exit. If you don't have providers leaving the market, it must be because there's some subsidy that perpetuates their enables their bad product to continue to come to market. So you have to have some failure to see a healthy market. Now, in the past, the assumption has been that the government will step in if a university experiences acute liquidity or solvency crises. But interestingly, since 2010, white paper in 2010, the government explicitly declared it's not our job to back up an unviable institution. And the first problem to say is they're actually creating a policy environment which will make institutions unviable that weren't previously viable. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that the credit rating agencies, and you know, again, people don't realise that lots of universities now have credit ratings with Moody's and other agencies. Yeah. They have factored into their credit ratings that the government will intervene, but is keeping it under review. It doesn't believe that the government could survive the political backlash of allowing an established university to go under, or even though the government's saying it would. But with regards to institutional failure, with kind of university collapse, we haven't yet seen any obvious contenders for this. So government hasn't had to test this idea that it's committed to allowing institutions to fail, because the market exit is a sign of healthy competition. And at this point, we'd have to distinguish between healthy market failure, where a university says, well, we don't want to teach this subject anymore, and they teach out the subject, and unruly market failure, where a kind of university goes bust, and suddenly you have a crisis on your hands, that there are thousands of students who haven't finished their courses. The university can't pay can't meet its obligations, can't pay its outgoings. Something has to be done. If you see this kind of unruly situation, I think it would be very difficult for the government not to be seen to be doing something, even if it's just to make sure that all those students end up at another institution. Whether the government would come in and provide a financial backstop to a university that started to be clearly in trouble isn't clear. I mean, in the past, what's happened is often mergers have been organised by the government agencies and by the government intervening to find an institution to take over another institution. I think in the current environment that's much less likely, because it really isn't in anyone's interest to take on the burden of a failing institution unless that institution has some wonderful assets that a university could use.